Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McClernand, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back to Between the Before and After. As always, I have a special guest. I don't think there's ever a time I don't have a special guest because everybody I get to talk to is amazing, and I'm always excited to explore the stories. But today we're talking with Dr. Debi Silber. I'm not sure. I should have asked if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but
you got it.
All right, you got it. You're not a medical doctor, I don't think, or maybe you added MD to your title. Let's see, you are a doctor of psychology, and you have a very interesting field of study that I have some personal experience in, and you do as well, which leads to a really fascinating story and the amazing work that you're doing. So what I'd like to do is just hand it over to you, let you give people a brief introduction to yourself and the work that you're doing right now, and then we're going to dive into the story that led you to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, right now I'm running the PBT, the Betrayal Transformation Institute. And, you can imagine you don't study something like betrayal unless you have to. You study it because you study it because you have to. And it's all based on a study that I did, which made 3 groundbreaking discoveries. And we're just helping countless people move forward physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. After an experience with betrayal from a family member, partner, friend, coworker, self.
Yeah. And, when I think about betrayal, and probably everybody who listens, or almost everybody, has some kind of experience with a type of betrayal in their life. There's something about that that's different than just being wronged. For example, in my own story, I went through a violent trauma when living in South Africa. But the people who attacked me didn't know me. I was just a person. But I also went through like a really significant betrayal in my life that was from someone who was a very, very close friend. It was a business relationship that didn't go well and left me in a lot of debt and so on and so forth. But it wasn't even the money. It was the fact that I was betrayed by someone who I deeply trusted and thought was a close friend. That sort of thing is more difficult to overcome, I think, than just being wronged. What is it about about the human condition that makes something like betrayal so particularly painful and difficult?
Well, and you said it, and that was actually one of the discoveries, that it's a very different type of trauma because it feels so intentional. So we take it so personally. And this was the person, or these were the people who gave us a sense of safety and security. So when this is the person, these are the people to shatter that very sense of safety and security. It's traumatizing. And, while we can be betrayed by all kinds of people, it is when it's the people closest to us, it is absolutely traumatizing, and it shocks the body, the mind, the heart.
And I think the discussions around mental and emotional health have certainly expanded and broadened, and largely to a positive effect. But I try to be thoughtful around the use of the word trauma, because we know that there's terms on social media that kind of just get grabbed and thrown around flippantly without really kind of a full understanding of what they're saying. And so maybe it'd be helpful just actually for anybody listening to kind of define what are we really talking about when we talk about, so like, what is the sort of dividing line between like just an uncomfortable experience and something that's like legitimately traumatizing?
I can speak from the lens of betrayal, and I define it as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. So it's when, without our awareness or consent, someone chose to break that spoken or unspoken rule. That's a betrayal.
And what sort of defines, and I think every human experience is individual, but are there some defining commonalities, if you will, in how we respond emotionally, mentally, and even physically within our body when we experience trauma? I think what I'm trying to clarify here is how might we know that I've legitimately been traumatized versus I had an uncomfortable experience that I didn't like very much?
Right. Well, it depends on the severity of the trauma. Sometimes, we need resiliency skills to bounce back, restore, bring us back to where we were. But then when it comes to the bigger types of trauma, that's where we have an opportunity for transformation completely. And that was actually this in the study that I did, I was studying betrayal
Mhm,
and
mhm,
uh post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is, I kind of look at it like the upside of trauma, how that trauma, regardless, whether it's death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one, and I'd actually been through disease too. And I was like, nope, betrayal feels different for me. I didn't want to assume it was the same for my study participants. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, is it different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And it's
mm,
because it feels so intentional. We take it so personally. So think about it. The entire self is shattered: rejection, abandonment,
mm, mm,
belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, and they all have to be rebuilt. So I coined a new term, post betrayal transformation, which is, yes, you rebuild your life, but you also need to rebuild yourself. Like, for example, if you
mm.
lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't necessarily lose your ability to trust. It doesn't have to be rebuilt.
Right,
Betrayal
right.
just brings it to a very different level. So it's not to say what's better or worse, all traumas stink. But what I'm
Right, right.
saying is, it's the attack to the self is what
Yeah.
differentiates betrayal.
Yeah, which is really, really fascinating to think about. And we often talk about something like a physical death, but I
Mhm.
think there's also, maybe we could say, like metaphorical deaths, plural, that we experience in life as we go through these experiences, because there is the loss. You mentioned grief as well, the loss of something that we probably can't get back. And in order to transform, we have to be able to move past that. And
Mhm.
perhaps you could speak to this a little bit too, like what keeps us stuck is maybe not believing it is possible for us to move past that, or not seeing what is possible for us, which is probably why you do such an important and crucial work. Um, what is it that might keep people stuck from
Yeah.
being able to move forward?
You mentioned grieving. That's a really important piece in a very specific spot in when you're healing from betrayal, which is really what the third discovery was all about. I'm happy to share the third, or get
Mm-mm.
to the second one if you want to hear that, um, because they all tie together when you see it. To answer your question, I could just get right to the third.
Mm.
This to me was the most exciting. And what we learned was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 proven predictable stages. And what's
Okay.
even more exciting about that is, we even know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing now from betrayal is entirely predictable. And I'm happy to
Okay.
share the 5 stages if that
For
would.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we will get into that, but I wanna leave that as a little nugget of intrigue, because, of course, there's elements of your story that I also wanna explore as well, because, of course, the work that you're doing, what I love about it is, when we get into a work like this, it's very rare that I meet someone who doesn't have deep, intimate personal experience with something. That's a
Mhm.
part of the whole part of the story here. And so
Mhm.
if we kinda turn back the clock a little bit here, because I imagine, like, probably growing up, you didn't have this idea that I'm gonna become a betrayal, particularly like a betrayal researcher or a betrayal trauma researcher. What was life like for you, kind of growing up? Where did you grow up? And was there any indication that this is the direction you would go in?
Yeah, there was zero indication this was the topic I was going to study. It's actually my 30th year in business. It was health, and then mindset, and then personal development, and psychology, and later on. But it was really, I had a betrayal from my family, and
Mhm,
then I thought I did everything I needed to do to heal, and then it happened a few years later. This time it was my husband, so that was the
mhm,
deal breaker. Got him out of the house, and here I am, thinking, okay, well, what's common to these two experiences? I mean, of course, me, but what else? And I realized, in my entire life, I never took my needs seriously. Boundaries were
mhm.
always getting crossed, and I'm one of those people that believes, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here
Right,
I
right,
was,
right.
4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business, and I was like, nope, a book isn't helping me out of this mess. I need to get a whole PhD in it. So I enrolled in this
Mm-mm.
PhD program in transpersonal psychology, psychology of transformation and human potential. And while I was there, I did that study on betrayal. It led to the three groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life. But it was when I was going through that study, I just remember thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm going to heal from this, but if I do, I'm taking everybody with me.
Absolutely. So now you mentioned that boundaries is something that you struggle with and struggle with for many, many years. And I think
Mhm,
setting healthy boundaries is a crucially important aspect of any human relationship.
mhm.
And so again, I go back to like maybe the formative years of life because I think, but where did this come from? Maybe whether or not we do form boundaries and how do we form boundaries? Going through like childhood, teen years, and things like that. When you look back on that experience, do you see that there was this tendency to allow people to potentially breach your boundaries or take advantage of you or things like that?
It wasn't friends, it was my family. And
Mm,
the challenge with that is, you're a little kid and you're like, "Oh, these big people must know better." You know? So
mm,
so
yeah.
but I remember being this little kid thinking, and it was such a shock to me to even come up with this. One day I remember thinking, "What if it's not me?" And it shocked
Mm,
me and shook me to my core. And I don't know why, but I just said, "Just keep thinking that." And it turned into,
interesting.
"I don't think it's me." And then again, I remember exactly where I was. That's how profound it was. And then it turned into, what if it's them? Again, a shocker. And then eventually,
Right.
oh my gosh, it's them. And that was sort of like the get out of jail card, because I really knew, even though I was conditioned into believing it was all me that was wrong, bad, all these things. It wasn't. It really
How
wasn't.
old were you when you first had that thought? What if it's not me?
Yeah. I was probably 8, 9.
8, 9 years old. And like, where were you growing up? What sort of like somewhere? I'm guessing you're from the U.S. Do I have that right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I was in New York, and I'm telling you, I remember I was standing by a tree. Like, I remember that's how huge this was, that I
Okay, so you're
remember
eight,
that.
8 years old. You're in New York. You're standing by a tree. Was this at school or where was this taking place?
No, no, I was out. I wasn't in school, but I'm telling you, it shocked. It just was such a contrary way to think. But
Mm,
it
mm,
but
mm.
I don't even know what compelled me just to keep going with that. But it eventually became
So
the belief, and started this belief system that, and it really, then it was based on, well, wait a second, people like me, I have friends, and it was, as a little kid, you're
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
can't be that bad, right? And
So
it just grew and grew.
yeah, I think what I'm curious about here then is like, if at 8 years old you're already asking questions, what if it's not me? And you've mentioned like family members.
Mhm.
What were people doing to you at that age, at 8 years of age or younger than that, that had you like what was happening there that had you wondering, hey, something about this isn't right and I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah, it was mental, verbal, emotional abuse. Nothing sexual, nothing
Mhm,
physical,
mhm.
but enough where, you're being told things, you're being fed things, you're believing these things, and it gets you to completely believe in
Yeah,
this,
by all
in these
means.
beliefs that absolutely don't serve. And listen, people are acting from their current level of consciousness. So it wasn't
Mhm, mhm.
intentional. They were doing the best they could with what they had available to them. But I'll never forget, even just years later, where I always have a bunch of dogs. And I
Mhm,
remember
mhm.
looking at them one day thinking, I would never expect my dogs to act anything other than dogs. Like, why
Right.
would I ever expect anybody from a, certain level of where they are to act anything other than what they've always done?
Mm. So what family member, if you don't mind sharing, that is, what family
Yeah,
members were,
it's
were
not, I'm not looking to throw anybody under the bus, but yeah, but it really got me thinking very, very differently. And then, like I said, I thought I did everything I needed to do to heal. And then a few years later, it
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 comes back?
happened, and this time it was my husband. And it's interesting because when we talk about betrayal, a clear sign of an unhealed betrayal is repeat betrayal, where the
Of
face has
course, yeah.
changed, but it's the same thing. And I mean, we can spot an unhealed betrayal in work, in health, in relationship, and we keep getting opportunities in the form of people to teach us something. We are
Mhm.
lovable and deserving. We need better boundaries in place, whatever it is. And until and unless we get that, we're going to have these opportunities in the form of people to teach us. But think about it. Look, in my experience, for me to have that betrayal by my husband, and then for me to do something so huge for me, which was enroll in that PhD program, which changed my life. I mean, we made the discoveries, opened up the PBT Institute, the books, the TEDx talks, the
Mm-mm.
podcast, everything. It was, lesson learned, no reason to repeat itself. And that's the problem with so many people. They have this one belief. They don't heal. They have an experience with betrayal, certainly not suggesting it's anyone's fault. It's their
Mhm.
opportunity. They don't learn that lesson, and they live a lifetime of these repeat betrayals, not understanding that unless and until something huge changes, nothing's really
Mm-mm.
going to change.
Yeah, right. So there was a point in your experience when you went for "What if it's not me?" to
Mhm.
"I think it's them." Is this like a year or two later? Is this like you're a teenager now? Is this you're a young adult now? When did the switch go from "I wonder if it's not me" to "I'm quite sure it's them"?
Yeah, it took this whole process took a couple of years because keep in mind there was nothing I was do like it wasn't like I was
Mm-mm-mm.
following any sort of protocol. I mean, this was
For
just
sure.
me as a kid winging it and
Kind
whatever
of
came
exploring
up.
life.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
it definitely took a couple of years.
And not only that, of course, this is like happening, sort of pre-internet days. I'm quite certain,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
as such, not access to the same sort of level of information, communication, all that kind of stuff either, right? So, I mean, I think it's remarkable that you had this sort of sense of intuition that like something doesn't feel right about this, and I'm beginning to recognize this is not about me. Did that begin to affect your interactions with other people, maybe with friends, with schoolmates, things like that, as again you continue to go through your formative years?
Yeah, it was always that question of if I'm that bad, why do people like me? Why do I have friends? I'm okay. I think that I'm a
Mm-mm,
nice
mm-mm,
person. I've never. I mean, I can honestly say, even at this point in life, I have never intentionally hurt a human being, and I
mm,
can take a lie detector test on that one. So I really knew I don't think I'm that bad. There's
mm,
something
mm.
about, because it seems that only people who are saying or doing really hurtful things would would fall into that category, and I'm not doing those things. So I was sort of bringing logic into it as best I could,
Right,
but
right. It's
but it just
interesting. So
it wasn't making sense.
right, yeah, or like there's a gap there, but you're
Mhm,
connecting 2 dots, you just don't know how to fill that in yet. Now, so was there anybody or some people in your life who were a positive anchoring influence that helped, because you mentioned, "Hey, I have friends," and things like that, and so you
mhm,
had kind of this counterbalance. You weren't necessarily isolated with these individuals who were, say, verbally, emotionally, mentally,
mhm,
abusing you and mistreating you. Who
mhm.
in your life was helping you to kind of remain anchored to your sense of self through that time, if
Yeah.
anyone?
By the time I was probably, I mean, I met my husband at 18, and I
Mm,
would have to say, if I really think about it, my in-laws, who
okay.
just saw me from such a different lens, and I to this day, I mean, I have such a beautiful relationship with them, and
Mm-mm.
that was if I had to name, anybody, it would really be my in-laws. But other than that, no one. It was a total like self-learned, just keep going with this idea.
For sure. So you mentioned that you met your husband at 18. Is that which is
Yeah, so
still
we
quite young? And how did you guys meet? And what drew you to him, or what drew him to you? Or
yeah, and again, this is, I feel, the universe saying, okay, you have some major life lessons to learn here. And the first, 20 years, it was amazing. So we met in 84. I mean, I'm old. And
okay,
and it was
seasoned chicken
yeah, there you go.
instead of spring chicken. I've heard that
Right,
expression. I like
right.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very seasoned. And it was just the first 20 years were great. And then here I was raising, 4 kids and these 6 dogs, and his business was taking off, and we definitely grew apart. And then it was that absolute crash and burn. And I'll tell you, betrayal will show you who someone truly is. It also has the opportunity to wake them up to who they temporarily became. And just to close the loop on my story, um, you can heal from all of it, whether you heal yourself and move on. And I'm happy to share with you the other 2
Mm-mm.
discoveries to tell you exactly how to do that. Or, with my family, it just wasn't an option to heal and rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you have the opportunity sometimes to rebuild something entirely brand spanking new with that person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. So not long ago, as two totally transformed people, we married each other again. New
Mm,
rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. And
it's quite remarkable.
never in a bazillion years would I have done anything like that if
Mm, mm, mm,
he wasn't totally transformed, of course, and if I wasn't either. But a big mistake I see a lot of people make is they're just so sad and so uncomfortable. There's
mm, mm.
no transformation on either side, and they just figure out, okay, well, they just figure, okay, let's just kind of make this work somehow. And
So yeah,
yeah.
and you mentioned like the first 20 years were amazing. So it's like 18 to 38 kind of thing. And so like, what was it that made it amazing? What was it that like, where everything seemed like it was fantastic?
Mhm. Yeah, it was great. We were raising our kids and creating a life, and it was really good. It was really we were just having a really good time, and then it was,
And
the
was
few
was
years of
in that
horrible.
time, like, was there any like red flag, like in hindsight, any red flags, nothing like that? It just felt like there was
Not
this,
back then. No, not at all. Not at all.
right. And then there was this potentially like this sudden shift
There was
or,
a period of time where, it's just I was drowning in just trying to do what I had to do. I mean, imagine 4 kids, 6
yeah,
dogs, a thriving business, and I'm pretty
yeah.
much doing it on my own. And he's running his business,
Mm,
and so there was definitely a distance there, and then that crash and burn, which there's the worst kind of awful. Anybody who's been through
mhm.
it knows exactly what I'm talking about. And
Sure.
now is
So
it's like the better than ever, and for our kids too, because it's
so
like
so
they've
there
all
was
been
this.
through together.
Right, right, right. So in a sense, there was this growing apart. So you guys had been in
Mhm,
love. You had 20 great years together.
mhm,
But like maybe the stresses and strains, you mentioned he has a business or has a business, you had a business,
mhm.
and the stresses and strains of just trying to keep your head above water with all life sort of things going on led to you growing apart and maybe forgetting the reasons why you first came together. Is that,
No,
or
it's
what was taking place there?
yeah, there are so many reasons why betrayals can happen, and there's no one reason. I mean, and I don't know how spiritual your audience is, but uh, if they believe that sometimes there's a reason for everything, I'll share a
Mm,
quick story.
mm,
The What happens is, of course, trust is shattered. The person you
mhm,
trusted the most proved untrustworthy, and then you don't trust yourself, and you say,
mhm,
"Oh my gosh, where was I? How did I not see? How did I not know?" So if I
for sure.
can't trust the person I trusted the most, and I don't trust myself, how in the world can I trust in anything and anyone? And that's terrifying. So,
Absolutely.
and the study proved this, that we move towards spirituality because we need, or we're looking for some type of connection, whether it's
Mhm,
the spiritual side of our religion. Some people abandon religion completely. Some people who weren't spiritual at all became spiritual, and it's understandable. They're looking for that type of connection. They're looking to
mm,
trust in something or someone. So I had no connection. I saw a spiritual advisor who's since become a dear friend, and I walk into her office the first time, and she says, "Oh my gosh, how you planned this?" And she just starts laughing. I'm like, "What did you just say?" She goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." He needed something so catastrophic to crash and burn so he could be the husband, father, friend he signed up to be. You needed to crash and burn so that you could come from this deep place of knowing. You're going to have an institute. You're going to have all these books. You're going to have this huge following around betrayal. And I'm like, "You're crazy." And here I am.
mm.
So who knows?
So prior to this, you wouldn't have considered yourself a spiritual person, and then you go, okay, I'm going to start looking for answers. And this friend or this lady who's become a dear friend of yours,
Mhm.
what sort of spiritual practitioner is she?
She just, just is extremely intuitive, and um, just intuitive, insightful. It was just, I don't know, all of it was very, intuitively guided. Even for me to take on that particular PhD program, like why was I guided to that one?
Mm-mm.
It all made so much sense later on. And now, I mean,
Right,
everything
right.
she said, actually, it's I'm living it, so I get it. You know.
Yeah. And I'm kind of curious about this then. So, like, when you say guided, like, who or what benevolent force do you view as kind of guiding or steering or directing these experiences and leading in this direction?
Well, I believe, our highest version of ourselves are really what we're able to tap into to guide us. And it's
Mm,
when we're or God, source, universe, I mean, whatever it is for you.
mhm, mhm,
But what is so striking in so many people who've been betrayed, they learn to sharpen that intuition, and they realize that very often they turned it down, they turned it off. And
mm,
it's
mm,
one of those
absolutely.
things, and I learned, I mean, I've been coaching thousands of people for over 30 years,
Mm,
and
absolutely.
sometimes they're like, "Well, how'd you know that? How did you?" It's like the ability to hear what isn't being said, and it just, I guess it makes for a good coach, and it's just something we all have it. It's I don't know,
Yeah.
something I
So
just feel for.
yeah. And what was like, we talked about this when their husband had betrayed you. What was this betrayal? And did it take place like suddenly, or did it take place over a period of time? Like, was it like little by little, or was it
Yeah,
like a
it was
sudden?
infidelity, and that was the deal breaker. There's
Mhm,
just
mhm,
there was just no room for that. Now, I
for
will
sure.
tell you, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal.
Mhm,
And one group in particular, this was the group that had where the betrayer had very little consequences. And I
mm,
saw
mm,
2 things with this group. Number 1, a further deterioration of the relationship, and 2, this group was the most physically sick. Your
mhm,
broken
mhm,
heart can't handle that. And that was the deal breaker, and so here I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna heal," and that's it. That was my only intention, and people are so afraid of that, the complete death and destruction of the old, but
mm,
that's
mm.
the only way to birth the new, whether it's
Right.
just a new you or a new, collective, you and the person who hurt you as a very different, you're both totally different. That's the possibility.
So going through that experience, what ages were your kids when this took place? Were they
They were
still at home?
teenagers.
They were teenagers. Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why my husband transformed to the level that he did was he was the one who told them. And I
Mm,
would never
okay.
say what's right or wrong
Mhm,
for
mhm.
a particular
Absolutely.
person, but I think if anything is gonna have you wake up and realize what's important, it's losing all the people that mattered most.
Mm, mm. So, would it be fair to say that this was not necessarily a sort of malicious act, but maybe like an error in ways because you guys had grown apart. There was maybe some unmet needs or things like that, and so it sort of led down this path, looking to meet needs elsewhere. But really, it wasn't done with this malicious intent to destroy you per se.
I think with so many, and we actually have our rebuild program, which is specifically for the betrayer. So I
Mhm,
speak to them and I get to know their motivations behind things. It's as it's malicious in that it's causing a depth of pain that is indescribable to
mm,
another
mm,
human being. It is totally and completely selfish because the person isn't thinking about what that hurt is causing. Now, it all depends. If there's, let's say, a narcissist who just there's zero empathy and
mm, mm.
they're
Yeah,
not having any empathy before, after, during, it's a different story.
for
But,
sure.
and there are ranges and scales and all of that. But it's the lack of consideration for the damage that's about to be caused. And I guess one of the reasons why, let's say, like I'm an empath and I'm a highly
Mm, mm,
sensitive empath. So I'm always feeling what that other person would feel if I were to do something. So
mm,
it's
mm.
I live very simply. Is this going to hurt someone? Yeah. Okay. Don't do it. Period. End of story. And the way, and then I feel everybody lives that same way. And I'm always shocked and amazed that that's not the case. So we
Mm,
never
mm.
know. Like I said, there are so many reasons. There could be unhealed trauma. There could be
Absolutely.
addiction. I mean, so many reasons. But
And so,
yeah,
yeah, so when this happened to you, and maybe at this point in time you hadn't dove into the research, the psychology, all this kind of stuff. Your previous business, like that you said, like fitness, health kind of thing, but it wasn't necessarily connected to this particular area of focus at this point in time. So, did you feel? I mean, in hindsight, like that you're not really equipped, and maybe we never really are until we go through it, but really equipped with the tools to deal with this. And then the follow up question would be, when you experience this sort of level of sort of indescribable hurt, what
mhm.
place does that lead you to, and what actions did it lead you to taking?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was in like the lifestyle business, helping people just whether it's health, mindset, personal development. I mean, that's what I was doing. And the beauty about that is we use a lot of that within the PBT Institute, because sometimes what you eat and how you move are the only things you have control of. So,
Mm-mm.
it's a great place to start. And of course, you'll feel better. You'll have clarity and a greater ability to focus as you're moving through these things. So I took a lot, like you look back, of course, you're like, oh, I get why I did that now. It all makes sense. Anything that works, we still, we're using within the Institute. But it's just, I was in business, like I said, for 30 years. I had no preparation for anything like this. And
Mm-mm.
who does? Who
Absolutely.
but it was after that, the pain was so profound. Like a book wasn't helping me out of this mess. I needed a whole PhD in it. And I was
Right, right.
diving full in with the sole intention of healing. That's it. I had no idea. I had no idea a roadmap was going to show up. I mean, I would love to get to the discoveries so you
Mm.
can see what emerged as a result of all of this. But I just wanted to heal, and I wanted my kids okay, period.
Mm-mm. Indescribable pain, mental, emotional, physical. How does that manifest in the body and in life? And again, how do you navigate other people, like relationships, if you still had friends, family, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, while you're in this pain?
Yeah. Well, that was actually the second discovery, what you just described. What was learned was, what was discovered is there's a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we've had 80,000 plus people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. And I pull the stats from the quiz every couple of months to
Mm-mm.
see where people land. Happy to share them. If you want to hear it, because the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms stemming from the betrayal, whether it's a betrayal that happened 40, 50 years ago, it doesn't matter. These are symptoms that people walk around today, and then they medicate or suppress the symptoms, thinking,
Yeah.
oh, it's due to stress. Oh, it's anxiety. Oh, it's this or aging. No, it's not. It's your unhealed betrayal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, in your personal experience, what was it that showed up for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was the anxiety, it was the sleep issues, the adrenal fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so many. It's yeah. I mean, I could read a few. Would you want to hear
Mm. I'm
some?
I'm curious about your experience and really how you
Sure.
yourself navigated out of this. So you reached to this place, like you said, adrenal fatigue, sleepless night, dealing with
Mhm.
anxiety, all of these things. So
Yeah.
you get to like maybe even the lowest point in your sort of human existence, the most difficult place. How do you dig yourself out of that? How did you
Yeah.
yourself dig out of that?
Yeah. I couldn't afford not to. I had kids to raise, I had a business to run, and I just couldn't afford not to. And then what was happening was whatever the research was proving worked, I tried. And then I was seeing clients at the time, and they were like, how are you so heavily medicated? Like they couldn't even get through their day. And they were like, how are you doing this? And I would just start telling them what I was doing, what, the having, if also the wrong type of support does way more harm than good. So I was very
Absolutely.
mindful about who I was spending my time with. And I was just, it was really kids, work, crash, kids, work, crash, kids, and just
Yeah.
implementing what I was learning just to
So
get
it
me
sounds
out of
like
this deep, painful hole.
you had in all of this, so you had something to anchor yourself to pull you forward. You had people that still were relying on you, and so you used that as an anchor because maybe you didn't have that within yourself at this point in time because your sense of self had been significantly injured or damaged going through this experience, and so you kind of had to anchor and connect to others in your life to help move you forward, whether consciously or subconsciously.
And there was a part of it where I just, it maybe it was subconscious at the time, but I knew this roadmap that was just being created would serve if I
Mm,
just figured it out and used myself as the means of figuring it out, and the study participants, it'll serve. So I have no idea, just keep going. And it felt like I was
mhm,
in this
mhm.
sort of transformation tunnel where there was no light at all at
Yeah.
the, and you just can't see the light at all. And I would check in with myself every couple of weeks. Where are you? Where are you? What are you? 10%.
Mm,
Oh my gosh, 10%, 20%. Oh, wait, there's light, but I'm nowhere close. Wait, there's 50%. Okay, just keep going. And if it doesn't work, don't do it. If it works, keep doing it. And
mhm.
it was as deliberate and intentional as that.
See, and thank you for sharing that. I think this is really, really powerful because while stats, facts, and statistics, of course, they're important because they inform us and guide our decision making and so on. At a human, at an individual level, when we hear that this is what a real human being did in real life, essentially, that really makes a difference for people. So I do appreciate you sharing that. And obviously, we've hinted at over the course of this. There was 3 discoveries, and we've kind of touched on the in sort of broken segments. But maybe if we're to bring them forward again and say, like, you did this study on betrayal and post betrayal syndrome and whatnot. What kind of, in a nutshell, were these 3 discoveries that came forward?
Yeah, the first was that betrayal is a very different type of trauma. So it gets its own
Yes.
name, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. The second was that there's a collection of symptoms so common to betrayal, it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And
Mm,
time or a new relationship will not heal it. Healing must be deliberate and intentional. And we have the
mm,
specific symptoms that people experience that they often treat. They'll go to the best gut doctor. They'll go to a sleep expert. They'll go to their, MD. And it has nothing to do with any of that. They're hacking away at the symptoms unless and until they get to the root of it. That's why our certification program is for doctors, coaches, healers, therapists, so they do get to the root. The third
mm,
discovery was that while people can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and most do, if they're going to fully heal, go from post-betrayal syndrome to post-betrayal transformation, they will
mm.
go through those 5 proven, predictable stages.
Yeah. Okay. Which is really fascinating. And what are those stages?
Yeah. So they're all mapped out in Trust Again. It's what we teach within the Institute. It's what all of our coaches are certified in. Here's a boiled down version of them.
Of course.
So
Yeah. We're just going to explore it in a tiny little nutshell here. Which
yeah,
um,
tiny little, I mean, it's going to take like 5 minutes or so. Are we okay?
coconut sized nutshell. Oh yeah. You
Okay, all right.
betcha.
So stage 1 is before it happens. And okay, I'll just leave off stage 1 and just start with stage 2.
Yeah.
Stage 2, the scariest of all of the stages, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day, the scariest. And it's the
Mm,
breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is at a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. You can't wrap your mind around what you just learned. Makes no sense. Your worldview has just been shattered. That's your mental model. The rules that govern us, that prevent chaos. Don't go there. Trust this person.
mm,
And in
mm,
this
mm.
one life-altering moment, every rule you've known and held to be real and true is no longer. The bottom is bottomed out, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. It's traumatizing. But think about it.
Right.
If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You grab hold of anything you could to stay
Mhm.
safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3.
So
Survival instincts. Yeah.
So stage 2, it's individual, of course, but do we know that we see approximately, is this like 48 hours? Is this 2 weeks? Or what do we see in terms of time frame that people might be in this place?
Yeah, it has more to do with willingness than anything else.
Interesting.
The more
Fascinating.
resistant someone is, they'll stay there for a really long time.
Okay.
Resistance and willingness had more to do with anything than time.
Mm. Super important. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
Okay, so stage 3 then.
Stage 3 is by far, hands down, the most common place we get stuck. It's the most practical out of all of the
Mhm.
stages. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? How do I feed my kids? And this is where we get stuck. And here's why.
Yeah.
Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. And because we
Ah.
don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5, transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we park here, we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we do. And 4 things happen. The first thing is we start getting all these small self benefits from being here. You get your story,
Mm.
you get to be right, you get sympathy from everybody, and on
Mm,
some level
mm.
that feels good. So you plant roots here. Because you're here longer than you should be, now your mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe just,
Acclimatize.
and so you plant deeper roots. Now, because this is where you are and these are the thoughts you're thinking, well, this is the energy you're putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now you
Mm.
start attracting people and circumstances and relationships towards you to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. Gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. Right here, we resign ourselves. We're like, this stinks, but I have to work. I have to feed my kids. So we
Mhm.
start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever it is, right? To numb, avoid, and distract ourselves. So think about it. We do it for a day, a week, a month now, to habit, a year, 10 years. I can see someone 10 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they look at me like I'm crazy and they say it happened 10 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
that's why I wrote,
how do we get out of stage 3 then?
yeah. And that's why I wrote From Hardened to Healed, because while trust again moves you through all 5 stages, everybody's winding up and staying in stage 3. So From Hardened to Healed is just for stage 3. Anyway,
Yeah.
if you're willing, again, there's that word again, willing to let go of the small self benefits, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where
Mm,
you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but you just stopped the massive damage you were creating in stages 2 and stage 3.
mm.
Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, you know, all your stuff is in there. It's not cozy yet, but you're like, okay, we can do this. It feels like that. But think about it. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't
Mm.
take the things that don't represent who you want to be in your new space. And what I found was if your friends weren't there for you, right in this very spot of stage 4, you outgrow them. You don't take them with you.
So what, because you mentioned leaving behind some self benefits, which is of course
Mhm.
part of what keeps people stuck. What compels people to let go of those benefits and move into this uncomfortable space? What is it that makes me want to pull forward from that?
Yeah, you know, I did 2 TEDx talks, and in the first one, I remember saying, when the pain of where you are becomes greater than the fear of the unknown, you jump.
Mm, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's a big moment where you are receiving benefits, but life stinks. You're
Mm,
not
mm, mm.
feeling good in your health, in your relationships, in your work, in anything. And you're just fine. Yeah, I'm fine. No, you're not. You're stuck.
Yeah.
So when you realize there's so much more, once you're willing to let go of the story and all the people that go along with it and all of that, that's where transformation begins. But it's
Mhm.
very scary. You know how many people we work with who will sabotage their healing because
Yeah.
they don't want to outgrow their betrayer.
Mm.
Now,
Isn't that
there's no
fascinating?
change in the betrayer, but it's just the only benefit is familiarity. That's it.
Mm-mm. So then stage 4 is you made the move to a new normal. Stage 5, which sounds kind of
Yeah.
exciting to me. I'm interested to now
Yeah.
hear what.
So when you're settling in to stage 4 mentally, you're making it cozy, you're making it home. You move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The
Mm,
body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. The mind is healing. You're making new rules. You're making new boundaries based on the road you just traveled, and you have a
mm,
new worldview based on what you see so clearly now.
mm. So now to go back to your individual and personal story, because this is fascinating. This prompts the question:
Mhm.
what sort of communication was it that opened the door to reconciliation with your husband, and
Yeah.
and maybe who opened that door?
Yeah. Well, you know, so he was out of the house immediately. Of course, I had to be in touch with him for the kids, and it was within days he got rid of his fancy things and this and that, and it's like he woke up in the biggest kind of way. And he said, "Well, what can I do? What can I tell me to read, study, anything?" And it just emerged. I said, "Well, listen, I'm very spiritual, so if you have any interest, that's it. You know, just read some books." And he took to it, and it began the most incredible transformation in him. There's something about being confronted with your own behavior that
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely wakes you up, and that's what it did for him. And he just took it and ran with it, and he became someone really that's transformation. You take all the parts of you love, and you leave behind everything that no longer serves.
Hmm. So from the time that the betrayal took place to the time that you began to be reconciled and
Mhm.
healed, what was that time frame?
Yeah, it was the exact amount of time I don't know, but a year or 2, it was definitely, yeah, it wasn't a tremendous amount of time. I mean, keep in mind, he radically transformed because he was the one who told the kids, and then I don't have easy
Mm.
kids like, "Oh, okay, no problem." No, they really let him know exactly
But I think
what
this
he
is really important to highlight,
Mhm.
that because it means that maybe we have the idea that this is gonna take many years to heal. And it's like it
Not
doesn't
with a
have to.
roadmap. No, not
Doesn't
at
have to.
all.
So then, did you end up getting back together while you were studying for your PhD? And
It
was he,
was
like, aware that this is, like, your study and
Oh,
this is what you're
yeah.
doing?
Very much so, and then, and I think, I healed as quickly as I did because, I mean, I was doing the work. I mean, that's really
Mhm.
it, and and then his healing continued. I mean, think about this. I birthed an entire institute
Mhm.
off of
Mhm.
what he did. Now, this is how you know someone is transformed. You would think, like when I wrote Trust Again, my story's in there,
Mm.
and I thought I sat the kids down. I told him, I said, okay, it's all in here. And I thought the kids would be like, oh, come on, mom. They were
Mm-mm.
right behind me. And my biggest supporter was my husband. And he said, you know
Mhm.
what, you're gonna show the world that betrayers can change too. So
Mm. Powerful. Debbie, you got a fascinating story and just tremendous insight and wisdom gleaned from life experience. I love how you turned a mess into an incredibly powerful message. Thinking of messages here, those who've listened to this conversation today, if they could take one thing away from this, what is it you would like them to take away?
yeah. You know, a few things, and I know you said one, but I'll make it quick. Just because it happened to you, it's not about you. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
And the second thing is I didn't do anything anyone else couldn't do. Staying stuck is a choice. I did the research, I have the proof. Staying stuck is a choice and it's a bad one. Move through the 5 stages and enjoy what stage 5 brings you.
Staying stuck is a choice. I love that because we could look at that like, how dare you say that to me? Or we could look like this is empowering. I
Well, I'm
don't
saying
have
it
to
with
stay
love, and
stuck.
I hope that's how it's received.
That's what we want. Debbie, thank you so much for being on today. It's truly been a pleasure. Thank you for all the amazing work that you do, and I'm excited to see what comes out from the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.